I get to watch Justin Jefferson, who's really making a case for Offensive Rookie of the Year one more time before the season runs out. And I kind of hope that they just let Kirk Cousins throw the ball a bunch, and these running backs don't even matter. One thing I do want to say about this crazy week is that business decisions for football teams mean very different things in week 17. With playoff implications for so many teams, we're going to see them bringing their level best. But in games like this, especially where Dalvin Cook, for terrible family reasons, is out for this game, we might see a little bit of preseason-like football where they're playing backups a little more often. Maybe Amir Abdullah might get work if he hasn't been hurt already this season. But for my sake, I hope that we get to see a little bit more Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, especially with Kyle Rudolph now placed on injured reserve. That passing offense is extremely consolidated. So I think there might be some goodness here, especially if you want to stack up Cousins with one of those two great wide receivers.
Yeah, the total in this game is a 54 too. So we are expected to see quite a bit of points, right? Minnesota's still 7-point favorites. I look at this and see a game with zero implications, but one where the Vikings have a 30.5 point total.
Right.
So even if Dalvin Cook is out, yes, I think they will lean on guys like Abdullah and Boone or whether I don't know who it's going to be, Madison, but I like the passing game as well. I'm with you. Now, am I huge on it? Not necessarily, because we know they want to run the football as much as they can if they get up early, sure. But you do have a team that has Thielen and Jefferson, two guys that have broken many slates just this year alone and ended up in Millie Maker winners. Kirk Cousins may not be a stud, Matt, but I think it's an interesting spot. No doubt about it. You are going to have to pay, though, because both of those guys are on DraftKings are 7,400 plus. Irv Smith coming off that monster game. Kyle Rudolph's on the IR. And he had 6 for 53 and 2 touchdowns last week out. Mm-hmm. So there are ways to attack this. On the Detroit side, I have some more reservations here. And if DeAndre Swift's ownership is going to be where it is currently, which is the second highest owned player on the slate, and to be fair, ownership doesn't mean as much on a 15 gamer as it does on these smaller slates. 19% isn't that insane. There are just a few other running backs at a similar price point that I might be targeting here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this isn't necessarily the only way to look at ownership projections, but if we're seeing a 19% projected ownership, ask yourself, do a thought experiment. Does DeAndre Swift really have a 19 or 20% chance of outperforming his running back 12 salary on the slate at 6,400 on DraftKings? Does he really have a 20% chance of hitting 18 points if Matthew Stafford is less than 100% or not even playing? My quick answer is definitely not. Even though I love DeAndre Swift as a talent, we've said this before on previous shows that we're going to be looking at him in season-long leagues in 21, but it's not very appealing today or this week. I just don't see it. Really, the entire Detroit offense is one that I'm only really looking to as a run back option in the receiving game if I'm playing a Minnesota stack who's fourth in our top stack tool. And other than that, maybe Marvin Jones in the passing game. But like you said, sure, play DeAndre Swift if you feel like he fits salary-wise or if you're basing around this game as a whole. But I probably am moving off. I'm going to be lower than the field if that's where the ownership stays this weekend.
Yeah, I would say here's how I look at this. And I've mentioned it many times throughout the week on these strategy shows. The onslaught approach could be more viable this week than it has been in the past. We saw last week Watson, David Johnson, Brandon Cooks, and then T. Higgins coming back. We've seen a lot of Bills onslaughts on those smaller abbreviated slates. Mm-hmm. I think you have to be careful doing one of those lineups on a 15 gamer. There's no doubt about that. But I could see this no doubt being a game where Minnesota wins, 47-0 or 47-7, just as Tampa Bay blew the doors off this Detroit team last week. That to me would be no surprise. Do you have anything else from this one?
Yeah, only to add to your strategy point there to say that I think if you have two games in this big slate that you really, really love, especially in big tournaments, base your whole lineup around there. Maybe one player from a game outside of it. I love that idea. Just consolidating the slate in your head for one lineup is a great idea. Yeah, that's really it for this game too.
All right, let's talk Miami and Buffalo. This game does have some pretty significant implications, Matt. Mostly Miami looking to get into the playoffs. I'm pulling for them. big Flores guy. I wish Fitzpatrick was starting, but that won't be the case. He already stated right after last week's game that Tua would be back under center. But really, the Bills are dealing with some injuries, and we can get to them in a minute. Let's start with the Dolphins, though. They've got a strong defense, but their offense has been good enough at times. They're going to be without Jakeem Grant. Devontae Parker remains questionable again. Is Myles Gaskin someone here that should be considered, especially given that he's pretty much the same price as DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like Myles Gaskin. He really pops in one of my favorite running back opportunity metrics. Said it many times before on this show. If you've watched quality opportunities per game, he's in the top 5 running backs in that metric, and he's only 5,300. Yes, I get it. It's the Miami Dolphins. They don't have an explosive offense, and especially with Tua Tagovailoa at the helm, they don't finish drives at a league average rate, but they find a way to win. And like you said, I would be all over this team if Fitzpatrick was starting. Actually, you saw in my data deep dive over the last 8 weeks, if you look at expected points added per play, that's an advanced metric that just adds up the value of every play a quarterback makes. No quarterback is higher in expected points added per play than Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's just been, he's having the Fitz magic part of his season, and I wish we got more of it. So Myles Gaskin is definitely someone I like. They are going to mix Salvon Ahmed in. And like you said, the receiving core is just such a mess here. I'm probably staying away, especially with Tua slated to start.
All right. So I don't want anything to do really with this Miami offense either. That's Buffalo. Fair. Sorry?
That's fair. That's all I'm saying.
Outside of Myles Gaskin. So I like Gaskin. I just don't have much interest in the passing game. But I will say for the Buffalo side, it appears as if Cole Beasley is not going to play this week. He's being considered by McDermott as week to week. Usually that's not a good sign. John Brown gets activated from the IR, and then they then he gets placed on the COVID-19 list. So I don't know if he is going to play. They're dealing with a couple banged up bodies here. That introduces Gabriel Davis not only into the offense where he's already been somewhat decent, but now as really the number 2 receiver on this team behind Stephon Diggs. He's $3,600 on a 15-game slate. When you're dealing with presumably 2 guys being out, I don't know for a fact if John Brown's going to be out, but even if he plays, well, I guess we could talk about, what slot work these guys are going to get. Do you think Gabriel Davis right now is viable?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially a pivot off of Stephon Diggs, who looks like the 3rd highest owned or projected own wide receiver in the Awesemo projections, ownership projections right now. And his projection looks good, even though he's the 5th highest salary wide receiver. If you're leveraging off of that high ownership and that solid expectation for Diggs, I think you have to look at Gabriel Davis. I think I also heard that Kenny Stills is likely to sign with them. Maybe I'm just thinking in 2017, but I do actually think that Kenny Stills, if he has anything left in the tank, would be a solid add for that offense. He's not on the DraftKings slate, so we don't have to worry about it from that perspective. But Gabriel Davis has been okay in terms of his expected fantasy points. He's at 48th among wide receivers on the slate, and he's performed right around expectations. So the Miami defense has actually been pretty strong against secondary wide receivers, but I like it as a game theory play when we know so much attention is going to Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, so do I. Diggs has been spectacular, though, man. Leads the league in yards and receptions and targets. I mean, it's so crazy how good he has been with Josh Allen. What are your thoughts? This is really the big question here, because I'm assuming when it all comes down to it, we like to take some of the tools that we have at Awesemo and kind of apply that to our process and our conversation on these shows. Buffalo has a 14.6% top stack probability. Quarterback ownership right now at 5.7%. Of course, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs are expensive, but that top stack probability is very high for a 15-game slate. They're not really getting a ton of ownership right now, and I think some of that might have to do, with Miami being a good defense. Does that appeal to you, though, seeing, all right, this team's offense has been virtually automatic, and people are apparently shying away from them a little bit?
Yeah, if we have any sort of hesitation on ownership when we have a top stack probability of number 1 in the league, and we know where the ball's going, we don't have to overthink Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. We don't have to overthink Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Let's not overthink Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. So I'm absolutely with you. If we have any sort of hesitation, or even just owning both Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs on a lineup makes you a little bit unique, I'm all over that. Again, from a game theory perspective. And yeah, what else could you say about Stephon Diggs this year? I mean, I feel like a lot of us who have been following Stephon Diggs' career have been sort of wanting this year to happen for him for several years. And I encourage you guys to just find wide receivers like this that they're going to hit that elite tier of wide receiver. So you want to catch that wave. And he certainly caught it this year. Hats off to him. He knew how valuable he was, and he found a great spot to play.
Okay. Anything else from this one?
I don't really like the running game here. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, the Bills are clearly not devoted to either of them. So not really. Just the passing game if you're going to play the Bills.
Okay. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals. Here you go. This is one where Baltimore has a 90% chance to make the playoffs, Matt. There's really no reason they shouldn't be in. Tyler Boyd and Higgins on the other side are questionable, but it's really the only news I have for this one. You've got J.K. Dobbins, who has played or who has seen double-digit carries in 7 of his last 8 games, but he isn't seeing that monster workhorse-like opportunity because, well, he has a quarterback that's the best rusher in the league at his position, and Gus Edwards has also been involved. We'll start with Baltimore here. Big-time favorites, laying 13 on the road, only a 44-point total. Most of that speaks to Cincinnati's extraordinarily low implied total. What are we doing with Baltimore?
Well, I certainly love Lamar Jackson at a spot, especially because the Bengals have really, really struggled. If you look at fantasy points allowed over opponent expectation or opponent averages, they are terrible against running backs and rushers in general. So, of course, for Baltimore, we include Lamar Jackson as having a very positive matchup on the ground. And I was looking at PFF net advantages. It looks like the Ravens have the highest net pass blocking advantage of any team on the entire slate. So he should have time to throw. Not to mention, if he does choose to tuck it and run, he's probably one of the most dangerous players we've seen in the last decade with the ball. Lamar Jackson's considered to have a down year after his MVP season, and it really doesn't show in the metrics. He's still 6th in expected fantasy points. He's scoring 3 more fantasy points over expected per game. And I think his price is completely justifiable as essentially the number 1 highest salary quarterback since Patrick Mahomes isn't playing. I'm completely fine playing him naked in any sort of tournament or small field. And I don't mind stacking, especially with Mark Andrews 3rd in target share among all players over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Would you say he's a priority?
I haven't looked at how I'm going to stack out quarterback because I do love to play tournaments where I stack up, and I don't love stacking Ravens, but boy, it's going to be hard to get away from him. And I don't mind the price at all at 8K.
Do you have anything from Cincinnati, assuming Boyd and Higgins are active?
Yeah, I think Higgins looks like the better value. I know there's only a few $100s in salary difference, but it looks like over the last few weeks, Higgins has really emerged. So I'm going there first and foremost. He's outside the top 40 in salary. He's 4,700. And in terms of fantasy points scored over expectation, he's in the top 30 wide receivers. So I see a little bit of value there. I know Boyd's been injured and there's some uncertainty there. So if they say he's going to be a full go, maybe there's some value there, but I definitely prefer Higgins if you're going to play anybody.
Okay. Guys, by the way, we had to switch streams. We had the wrong title up there. My apologies to all of you if you jumped in late. If you missed it, Happy New Year's to everybody. Hope you have a wonderful one. Of course, we still have plenty to go in this show, but just repeating what was said earlier. And hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We're trying to get to 50K by the Super Bowl. I think we can do it. I honestly think this is doable. But anything, if you missed anything in that first 10 minutes, the most important thing is check out the promo code that we're running over at awesemo.com. It's 21 days for $20, everything on the site, or use the promo code HAPPY to get 20% off everything for the entire year of Awesemo Plus Platinum Annual. So $21 days for $20 using the promo code 2021, or HAPPY to get 20% off the entire year. I won't go into it too much further because some of you have already heard it, but just keep in mind it's everything on the site. And if you have any questions, you can DM me at Laffy_D. All right, Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Matt. Another one where Cleveland has a good shot of getting into the postseason. There's no reason they shouldn't, right? You got 17 teams making the playoffs. 7 teams, making the playoffs. Only one bye in each conference. Pittsburgh's resting Ben Roethlisberger. And Mike Tomlin, from what I'm hearing, he said, we're going to go in there, try and win a football game. He said 1 or 2 other players might rest. Have we gotten word on who that is yet?
Well, yeah, they said that Big Ben is definitely going to rest, but I know
believe Ben
is,
but he was speaking after that news.
I don't believe Mike Tomlin. I don't believe a word he says.
Okay.
So it could be the entire offense. He could literally start every player except for Big Ben at this point. No, I don't think we've gotten the exact word. I apologize there for who he means that he's going to not play. I assume TJ Watt might be in that conversation if you can keep him off the field. I saw an analytics breakdown of him, and there is no question he should be the defensive player of the year. But yeah, I'm not sure what Tomlin means when he says that right now.
Me neither. I do know what I mean, though, when I say I have no interest in this Pittsburgh Steelers team this week.
Oh, of course not. Oh, gosh. We already saw this experience last year with basically the same lineup. No need to play it unless you're in super large field tournaments. If you think that they somehow keep pace with a team in the Browns that absolutely needs this game to make it to the playoffs, more power to you. In larger fields, I think it's an okay choice. We saw Deontay Johnson have some success with Rudolph, but for the most part, it's a stay away option for me.
All right. On the other side of this one, Cleveland must-win situation. They are closing their practice facility again, Matt. More COVID-19 issues, but they are anticipating getting all of those wide receivers who were out last week back. I've never seen so many, 2 and 3 tight end sets in a football game than I did with this Cleveland team last week. Ultimately, though, Pittsburgh is still a solid defense, and we don't necessarily know what's going on with their They lost, losing Dupree, losing several pieces definitely knocked them down a rung on the hierarchy of defenses this year. I still think Cleveland wins. They're still 9.5-point favorites. All of these things are pretty beneficial, but still they have a 26.25 implied total. I guess I could be looking to like a Chubb or a Kareem Hunt, maybe someone like Landry in the passing game, but with 15 games, it's still a divisional game to me. These teams still play hard. They're still usually lower scoring. I don't have a lot from Cleveland either. Maybe you can change my mind.
Yeah, and I think they kind of galaxy brained last week's loss too. Baker Mayfield, I think
that was pathetic.
Over 50 times. What are they doing? Just if you're going to run that many 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets, run the ball against the Jets. I'm sorry, especially as someone who played too much Nick Chubb last week. And I don't understand why Jarvis Landry is priced inside the top 15 wide receivers as if this is a blow up matchup for the offense here on Cleveland's side of the ball. The Pittsburgh defense, as you said, is still one of the top tier defenses in the NFL. In expected points allowed per drive, they're still number 1, and they're in the top 5 in expected points allowed per play as well. So, yes, I like Nick Chubb, certainly as a player, but as a third highest salary running back for a team that gives up 3 points, almost 4 points below opponent averages on a per game basis, that's tough to play here. I actually like Kareem Hunt a little bit more at the 18th highest running back, but I looked at the Awesemo projections this morning, and we definitely defer there. They're not bullish at all. That's probably respect to the stout front line of the Steelers.
So that's pretty much it for you on this one then.
I think, I think Cleveland still wins. I still want to say that as I sort of badmouth the entire offense here. I still think they pull this out, and especially since the Steelers aren't playing for anything, but it doesn't look that appealing when you consider the strength of the Pittsburgh defense.
I'll tell you what, 9.5 points is a lot of points. That's a lot of points. But these, I'm telling you, Matt, you know this. You're a Steelers guy, right? You're a Steelers fan?
Yeah, my girlfriend's from Pittsburgh, so I'm adopted in a little bit.
Okay.
You can't not be.
Well, you're a football fan. And these AFC North rivalries, outside of it being, I'm talking about when it's actually a good team against a good team, they are competitive games. And oftentimes they are not shootouts either. I know we've seen a couple of them this year. Just recently, Baltimore against Cleveland was an absurd shootout. But I just don't see any way that happens here because, if you're the Steelers and you manage to keep this close, it's not going to be with your offense. There's just no way that's going to happen. I can't believe after everything I saw last season with Roethlisberger going down in week 2 and seeing what they had to do at the quarterback position, I just simply don't see any way that Mason Rudolph is going to drive this football team down the field. I don't see it happening, despite how many good pass catches they have. They have a completely anemic run game as well. So I think Cleveland does enough to win this game, but I don't disagree that, they are, put it this way, they are known to disappoint throughout the years.
That is certainly true. And I saw that 4for4's TJ Hernandez put out a great Twitter thread. I think it was in the last 2 days here, where he was talking about win and in football teams in week 17 actually performing slightly below their implied total. Whereas for the most part, on average, teams perform just slightly above their implied total. Might be noise, but a really interesting tidbit that goes along with what you were saying there. Cleveland might win, but they might also disappoint compared to their implied Vegas total.
Sure. I'm okay with that approach. Let's talk about Dallas and the New York Giants. Another game where I was preparing the show and I'm thinking, okay, no playoff implications. And I thought to myself, wait a second, this is such a bad division that if Dallas wins and Washington loses, and Washington plays Sunday night against the Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys could be in the postseason. I think that's it, right? Don't they just need to win and Washington loses?
I've got your playoff scenarios right here. I got you. I believe that's right.
Yeah.
The Cowboys clinch with a win plus a Washington loss. That's right.
That's all. That's it. And you know what? I wouldn't be shocked to see Doug Peterson's dumbass decide that, hey, we want to win this game, right? Let's win this game and knock ourselves out of a top 10, the top 8 draft spot. If he does this, I swear you're never going to see me again, man. I'm done. I'm done with sports. I'm writing them off for the rest of my life. If they go out and win this football game, right? They win this game. Not only are they getting Dallas into the postseason, assuming Dallas beats the Giants, but they're losing the potential to have a top 5 pick. They'd blow it anyway. Howie Roseman will find a way to screw it up. But I've said enough. You know how I feel.
Living up to the Philly sports pessimist name right now.
Yeah, right. They can't win this game. The Eagles cannot win this game, and I'm sure they will. But anyway, Andy Dalton had a monster tournament winning type performance last week. 377 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Just a colossal effort against, you guessed it, the Philadelphia Eagles. Michael Gallup had a huge game as well. Just, what was it? Michael Jaquette, I think they just picked on all game long. And Amari Cooper had a couple big plays, went over the 100-yard mark for what feels like the 19th time against the Eagles in the past 3 years. So ultimately, what are we doing with Dallas against a better New York Giants defense? I don't know if the Giants want to play for anything, but was last week more of a flash in the pan to you, or do you think that this is something that can, hold a little bit of momentum going into week 17?
Well, this is certainly what the Cowboys thought about when they paid so much money to bring on Andy Dalton in this break glass scenario that happened this year where Dak Prescott went down for the year. And I got to hand it to Andy Dalton, not just last week. In the last 8 weeks, he now ranks 9th among quarterbacks in expected fantasy points per game.
Matt, I'm sorry. 1 second. Someone mentioned something in chat. It's very important.
Yeah.
If the Giants win and Washington loses, the Giants are in as well.
That is just unbelievable. So this is going to be a competitive game. This is absolutely going to be a competitive game. And hey, the Cowboys are not built on their defensive prowess. So if you think that this game gets wacky because both teams really want to play and neither defense can really show up, then this might be an unexpected shootout, especially with an implied total. Right now, I have it south of 45 points. So I think the over probability is a little bit higher here than we might think. Of course, this could turn into one of those disgusting NFC East slugfests that's like 17-13 with 3 minutes left. But I digress. Back to Andy Dalton. He has really overperformed my expectations. And as you said, actually, Michael Gallup has led the team in my favorite opportunity metric for wide receivers, true weighted opportunity share. So, of course, Amari Cooper is still priced higher at 23rd among wide receivers. But Gallup is actually outside the top 50 and much lower priced than CeeDee Lamb even. I don't know if this is a flash in the pan. He's already up to 32nd in expected fantasy points per game. So I might just bet on the opportunity here, knowing it's a must-win game. And I don't think, based on the opportunity we've seen here, Lamb is necessarily a value at 30th among wide receivers. So I'm going with Cooper and Gallup, sort of like you mentioned. And with Tony Pollard coming on in the running game, I'm kind of staying away from that whole situation. So I realize they're 19th on our top stack tool. I don't mind a Dalton Amari or a Dalton Gallup stack really at all.
It's not, yeah, I don't hate it either. I think this is a tough game to predict. Both teams could make the playoffs. They shouldn't, because, you know, the draft pick gets way worse and none of them have a shot. But someone's got to win the division. And, you know, I'm glad it's not the Eagles, but this game's going to be fun, because I don't really care how bad your records are. It's going to be a fun game to watch, because you're watching two bad teams battle for a playoff spot that's ultimately going to hurt their future. But from a DFS standpoint, you're right about Gallup. And you think about it, there is no real alpha number one receiver on this team with Andy Dalton under center anymore. There's not. We saw Dalton pick on the Eagles' weaknesses last week, and Gallup just so happened to be covered by Jaquette. I think I was pissed at myself for not having as much Gallup last week at 4,100, and I think at 5K he's totally fine as well. Amari Cooper 5,800. Both are just very talented receivers. They may not have the best quarterback, but but it's not like Andy Dalton is one of these terrible Ben DiNucci type backups. He was a legitimate starter for years, right, albeit not a top one, but still a starter. So the Giants side of the ball, you've got Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Golden Tate, all questionable. I don't know which one of them is going to play, but I want to start with the run game, actually, because Dallas has been decimated in the run game. Their defense improved last week against Philly, and they've looked a little bit better. But is Wayne Gallman to you viable at 5,300 in what you said could just be kind of a slugfest on the ground, doesn't really shoot out?
I have players in that price range, especially at the running back position, that I like more than Gallman, but he's fine. I saw that the Awesemo projection is really right in line with his salary-based expectations. And this Dallas defense has actually improved a little bit over the last 5 weeks. They now rank right at league average in fantasy points allowed over or under opponent average, 13th in the league, which is something we did not see at the beginning of the year. I still think you're looking at a subpar rush defense, and it's one that we've been picking on. So Gallman in that sense is fine, but I just have been fine leaving the Giants offense alone, because they're almost always higher upside offenses, you know, besides that 2-touchdown Alfred Morris game randomly. You know, I don't think we're looking for a diamond in the rough here. Is he okay? Yes. Do I need to play him? Not really at all. And get this, the Giants right now, out of the playoffs, have the 8th pick in the draft if the season were to end today. But if they win, they're in the playoffs. Absolutely insane.
I know. And there are a lot of people that don't understand, I shouldn't say don't understand, but just don't know that if you make the playoffs, the best draft pick you can get is the lowest team, or the lowest team to make the playoffs. So if you're a wild card team and you win the Super Bowl, you have the 32nd pick. You could have the 8th worst record in the league, make the playoffs in a terrible division, and the best pick you can get is, 18th or 19th now, because you have additional teams in the playoffs. That's a big difference for sure, especially for 3 teams that aren't making any noise in the playoffs to begin with. If they do, I'll come back here and say I stand corrected. But I don't want anything from the Giants either. Now, as we move on, we're down 6, got a handful to go, pretty big handful. The Tampa and Atlanta game is one that is strange to me for a couple of reasons. Because first of all, the Bucs are 6.5-point favorites. You have a 50-point total here. We saw Tom Brady sit out the second half of last game. They just routed the Detroit Lions on Saturday Night Football. I'm not convinced that Brady's going to play a ton here. They're locked into the playoffs. They can't win their division. They can't get a bye. I suppose maybe they can jockey for better positioning if they end up getting into the conference finals and have home field maybe. But yeah. I don't know. I don't see many reasons that Tampa or Bruce Arians should be risking his players' health in a meaningless game. But here we are at 6.5 point favorites. What do you make of that?
If Brady plays, they're a high upside offense. Now, the Falcons defense has been better this season overall than they have been in much of the last few previous seasons, but we're still not looking at a top tier defense at all. I agree with you. They really don't have much to play for. But right now, assuming that Brady is in, just looking at the defensive matchup, Brady looks like a buy in terms of his salary-based expectations. His projection looks really good. The Falcons have struggled against opposing quarterbacks. They actually rank dead last in the league over the last 5 weeks in fantasy points allowed over opponent average. In my expected projection metric, which just looks at the player's expected fantasy points, and that previously mentioned defensive metric, Tom Brady comes out as a top 2 quarterback on the slate. So I see some upside there. As we've said for many weeks, we don't really know where that ball is going right now, especially with Evans, Godwin, and Antonio Brown all healthy. But I don't mind Tom Brady at all, assuming we're going to get at least 3/4 of him. I think there's a blowout possibility for sure here.
Me too. But I'll say on the other side, Matt Ryan at his price point is interesting as well. Just one thing to point out, Ronald Jones is still questionable. Leonard Fournette is questionable. You know, you had Ronald Jones with the finger injury. He was also on the COVID-19 list. There's a number of issues here dealing with this backfield in Tampa Bay. Leonard Fournette has that abdominal injury. Like, do they play this week? This is something we have to pay close attention to, whether or not they're getting full reps in practice, because if not, will it be LaShawn McCoy? Will it be Keyshawn Vaughn? Is it a situation to avoid entirely? I don't know, Matt. And maybe because we have so many games, this is probably one where I'm not sure I'm even going to take the risk.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought about as you were saying that, is I'm looking for situations that I can scratch off my list. With 15 games on the slate, I want to see how I can narrow down situations. And if we hear any sort of rumbling about them resting players, I might just take the safe approach and just say, that's not for me this weekend. I'll go to better spots with more on the line.
Okay. Atlanta, you're right. There could certainly be a blowout brewing here. I don't know what Arians is going to do with the offense, and that's always the concern with Week 17 slate. But Matt Ryan's $5,900 on DraftKings. Russell Gage is $5,100. You know, Hayden Hurst is $3,700, and Calvin Ridley's expensive. But assuming Julio Jones sits, and at this point, there's absolutely no reason he should play. He
should not.
Yeah, he didn't play last week. Right. He didn't practice yesterday. So I'm just assuming he's inactive here. This is still a very discounted price point on Matt Ryan, just given his proneness to chuck the football, right? Like, he's had some pretty bad games, but he's attempted 39 plus passes in 3 of his last 5, 30 plus 5 plus in 4 of his last 5. And if they do go behind early, he might just be forced to throw the football a lot. So he is cheap. He does have a pretty high top stack probability in our top stack tool, 4th highest, but only 2% ownership right now, which is one of the lowest.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. It's exactly what I noticed when I was looking at this game. Yes, there's a blowout probability, but there also is a possibility that both teams just kind of keep pace in one of those NFC South late season shootouts that we've seen many over the years. And Calvin Ridley has 60 more air yards than the next highest wide receiver over the last 2 weeks. So when you talk about just the volume of plays, volume of passes and air yards in this offense compared to the rest of the league, there's absolutely upside there. And I certainly don't mind Ryan at low ownership stacked with his top receiver in Ridley. I'll have some Russell Gage. I think he's absolutely viable outside the top 30 wide receivers in salary. But in terms of fantasy point or expected fantasy points and fantasy points scored above or below expectation, Gage really does not pop off the page. So you're really just playing the matchup and using leverage off of Ridley. Ridley is the much more exciting option in this passing offense. And I don't mind. Is Hayden Hurst? Yeah, Hayden Hurst is okay as the 18th highest salary. The Awesemo projection says he's in the top 10. So he's just one of those unexciting, I need a touchdown tight ends. But especially if I'm playing Ryan, I think betting on Hurst is absolutely fine as well.
Yeah, look, he has five targets and a touchdown in each of his last 2 games. You can do worse than that at a tight end position, in a game that could end up being pretty high scoring. You're right. He's nothing. He's uninspiring, right? He doesn't have a 20 fantasy point game this season, but he does have 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 games in the double digits, which might be enough at a cheap price point. We'll get to Kittle and a couple other guys shortly, but I think Hayden Hurst in stacks is perfectly reasonable. Green Bay at Chicago. Green Bay here is, so if you look at the playoff scenario here, the Green Bay Packers, they made the playoffs. They won the division. They have a 79% chance of getting that first round bye. The only other team that is in contention there is the New Orleans Saints at 16%. So the Packers, this is actually a big game for them, Matt. You get a first round bye and only one team gets that bye, you're in business. That makes a huge difference. They already have home field advantage in, the frozen tundra and out at Lambeau Field. I'm looking at this as one where the Packers are 5.5-point favorites. They get the win, but I'm telling you right now, this game is going to be close. It's going to be competitive. Mitch Trubisky, David Montgomery, these guys are playing good football right now at Soldier Field. I think in a divisional game to close out the season, you're going to get a close game. And, do with that as you will. But the Bears have a 63% chance, according to 538.com, of making the playoffs as well. Meaningful game for both teams.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's a possibility that Aaron Rodgers, smug as he is, tries to make a statement. If the Packers really are for real, they do want to win this game and win it handily to kind of give them not only a bye week, but to sort of put that intimidation factor into the rest of the NFC. I don't think I love Rodgers right now based on his salary-based expectations, but I completely agree on the game flow here. You got to give credit to the Chicago Bears. I thought they were one of the most fraudulent teams when they were winning a bunch early in the season, and then they started losing a ton of games with Foles under center. But now they really look like a quality football team. So I agree with you. I think the most likely outcome for this game is a close playoff-style matchup because these are two playoff teams. I do want to say one thing. The Seahawks have an outside chance of getting that number 1 seed if the Packers lose and the Saints lose. So there is a third team in the mix there, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Packers, 4% chance. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
I missed that one.
Just because it was straightforward in that sense, I wanted to add it on for the viewers there. But sure. I don't love anyone in this matchup more than Devontae Adams, and I mean, just an awesome performance in the snow in Week 16. That was it was unguardable, completely unguardable last week, and certainly going to see really high ownership. Right now, he's projected for over 17, nearly 18% ownership on the main slate, but that's for good reason. There really isn't a connection like Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, and I know we said Stephon Diggs is sort of reaching that level, but in terms of floor and ceiling, I think Adams is really unparalleled on any slate he plays on, and so I'm always fine playing him, especially in a game that matters this much. More so than the running game because they certainly don't care about Aaron Jones. Jamal Williams has actually out-touched him in the last 2 weeks, so it's more of a stay away. Adams all the way there.
Last week was A.J. Dillon.
Right. And especially when the game got out of hand, they let A.J. Dillon just take over, and he kind of looked good. That Derrick Henry look-alike, happened for at least one play there on that rumble.
By the way, you guys heard me talk about the Dynasty League I lost because I needed one more yard from Aaron Jones. The guy who runs my league just calls me and he goes, "You need to call me right now." And I'm like, "I can't. Is everything okay?" He sends me a screenshot of MFL in my fantasy leagues who sent him the official scoring because, whenever you have a tie, you got to be careful about that. Deontay Johnson was stat corrected -1 yard. And I ended up getting the win, Matt.
Oh, Dude. Shut up. Yo, congratulations. That's amazing.
He got stat corrected from 75 to 74 yards. It's crazy.
I've never heard of that on a 1 yard stat correction. Congratulations.
And this league doesn't do fractional scoring, right? So, which is dumb, and we're changing that. He's going to change that next year.
Good.
So it gets rounded up. If you have 75, that gives you 8 points, right? If you have 74, it gives you 7. So if it went from 78 to 77, it wouldn't have made a difference. It went from 75 to 74.
That's unreal.
Unreal. I know. He already paid out though. This guy's my buddy that I was going up against. So I'm going to tell him we'll split the difference because that's a shitty feeling.
Yeah, that's a great play. Good man.
Anything else for Green Bay you like? Because I'm with you. Aaron Jones right now. I can't do it with it, whether it's AJ Dillon or Jamal Williams. They know their backfield's going to work regardless. Yeah,
I agree. I'm really not doing the running backs dance here. I want to bet on safer running backs than the Green Bay Packers backfield. Robert Tonyan still has a salary inside the top 5 tight ends, and that's really hard when you're betting on a player who needs touchdowns. Yes, he's had a tremendous season from a touchdown standpoint, and in my opinion was snubbed from the Pro Bowl roster. But you could do worse than Tonyan at 1.1% expected ownership, even though the salary is really high.
Yep. Whenever Tunyan's popular, I generally try and stay away from him because he's so touchdown dependent. But yeah, if he's coming in at no ownership, maybe you get that 2 touchdown game. Of course, he did go 5 straight weeks with a touchdown, Matt. Anything's possible. Chicago
and the Bears. Sorry, there. One last thing: the Bears have been abysmal against opposing tight ends. They ranked 29th in the league, giving up almost 3 points per game more than opponent averages. So they could pick on them.
That is good to know. Allen Robinson is a stud. His price continues to increase, though, and I think justifiably so. Mitchell Trubisky has actually been playing decent enough football lately, right? You've had some pretty solid games from them. They're winning. They beat Jacksonville. They blew them out. They beat Minnesota. They blew out Houston. They somehow lost to Detroit. But when they needed to win games, they've gone on a 3-game tear. Fortunately, scheduling has been pretty gratuitous to them. But David Montgomery has been the story here. He's getting monster workloads. He's now seen 55 carries over his last 2 games, Matt. And the only reason he's not getting targeted a lot is because they don't need to. If they're playing from behind, I anticipate David Montgomery being the primary pass catching back again, as we've seen since Tariq Cohen went down. He's expensive, and that's a conversation we need to have. But he has been good, and the volume has been there, and he's pretty much getting all of the work out of the backfield over the past several weeks.
You said it. I don't think he's the best player, the best skill position player. That certainly goes to Allen Robinson. And I'm never going to fault anyone for saying I'm playing more Robinson than Montgomery. But if you look at expected fantasy points, which is my favorite usage metric for running backs, he's 3rd in the league in expected fantasy points over the last 8 weeks. And he's still 4th in running back salary. So I'm completely fine playing him even before I look at the projections, which have him right in line with salary-based expectations. And I look at the fact that the Green Bay Packers are 27th in the league in fantasy points allowed over opponent averages to running backs over the last 5 weeks. I have absolutely no problem with David Montgomery's high salary. I know it's less appealing than when he was in the mid 5K range like he was before he had this tear of a late season, but I'm still completely fine with it, especially when we have less players with that guaranteed workload with Dalvin Cook not on the slate this weekend. I want safety at the running back position, and Montgomery completely fits that bill. Completely fine going there.
Yep. I will have some, and I think it's reasonable to do so, especially given Green Bay's primary weakness defensively has been that ground game. The problem is they haven't been exposed as much in certain games like last week because they essentially sold out to stop Derrick Henry. It was an impressive game plan. You have to hand it to them. They really did. But a lot of times they're just up by so many points that teams abandon the run anyway. Not Tennessee.
Tennessee.
They're running on 1st and 2nd down by 25. So it is what it is. I'll take it as a Derrick Henry owner and someone that has some interest in him this week. But first, we've got to talk about New Orleans and Carolina. As we stated in the last game, Matt, the New Orleans Saints, they're into the playoffs. Of course, they won their division. They have the second best odds to win, to get that second round or to get that first round bye. I would be shocked if the Packers don't get it, but we have to mention it anyway. They're going up against a Carolina team that has been better, I think, defensively than many of us would have anticipated coming into the year with all that turnover and so many young defensive players, rookie defensive players. But New Orleans probably comes in here and beats them up pretty good. What are you doing with the Saints and, particularly Alvin Kamara coming off that 6 touchdown performance on Christmas Day?
Yeah, if you survived that Kamar-mageddon, whatever you want to call it, and won your fantasy championship, hats off.
That's good.
You.
I hadn't heard that yet. I like that.
I certainly didn't make it up. Thanks, Twitter. It still was an incredibly impressive performance, even if you just take the unbelievable touchdown luck outside of it. He still had 26 expected fantasy points, which in terms of workload was the most valuable of any running back on last week's slate. So I'm completely fine with his running back 2 overall salary, with Drew Brees back in the lineup, and in my opinion, with very limited arm strength at this point in the season. I love Kamara as that favorite dump-off option, and everybody else in the Saints offense is considered auxiliary at this point. Now, Drew Brees actually doesn't pop really in the expected fantasy points metrics that I thought he would, since I thought he was playing pretty well since he returned to the lineup. But sure enough, the advanced metrics like expected points added per play and true drive success rate, some of the things I look at the data deep dive, shows him as a top 12 quarterback, basically right where he's been for years and years over the last 8 weeks. Again, that's a smaller sample size for him because he was injured for some of that time. But I was surprised to see that the Awesemo projection really isn't in on anyone, including Brees, except for as the aforementioned Kamara. So I think I like Brees in this matchup where there's a lot to play for, a little bit more against this young Carolina Panthers defense. Like you said, they have improved a little bit. They're about league average in most defensive metrics in the last 5 weeks. But still, I see the Saints winning this game handily, and we know where the ball is going when they're on offense. So that's always a situation to take advantage of.
So would you say any top options from the Saints?
Well, of course, it's Kamara. It's easy to say it's Kamara, but I also think that Latavius Murray is a fine leverage play outside the top 24 running backs on the slate. At 5,500, you do have full-time starters in that price range, like a Myles Gaskin, but I don't think that Sean Payton is particularly loyal to Kamara at the goal line just because he got all those reps last week. It's obvious that that's where most people are going to go. So the larger field tournaments get more and more creative there. Emmanuel Sanders at his wide receiver 32 salary, projections right in line with expectation. I don't hate it. I don't love it. He's fine at 5,200.
On the opposite side, Carolina, Teddy Bridgewater, Robbie Anderson, who is questionable to play. He didn't practice with this groin injury. Listen, if he doesn't practice today, I don't know. The concern here is week 17. What are they playing for? If Robbie Anderson ends up being out, does DJ Moore appeal to you at 5,700 despite the difficult matchup? And what are you doing with the passing game for Carolina? We'll talk about all of the injuries in the backfield after that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I've got to say that I'm a little bit disappointed. And I know I tend to discount a quarterback's first year in the system, but I think Teddy Bridgewater is holding back this Carolina offense. We've seen Curtis Samuel emerge. DJ Moore is going to end up with basically the same amount of yards he had last year. And if you look at my opportunity metrics that I look at in the data deep dive, DJ Moore has actually been the number one wide receiver over the last 8 weeks, just ahead of Robbie Anderson. So I have no problem at all when he's 5,800 outside the top 20 wide receivers on the slate. I do think that the game will be competitive, most likely. And the Saints have actually struggled against number one wideouts over the last 5 weeks. They ranked 20th in the league in fantasy points allowed over opponent average. So yeah, Moore is actually one of the players that stood out to me, especially if you think this game is an NFC South style shootout like it could be.
All right. So the backfield.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, it's tough, dude. Christian McCaffrey's out. Mike Davis is doubtful to play. I'm tired of how Matt Rule is going about this every week too. Like, just, you're hopeful, you're pessimistic, they're questionable, they're doubtful. The guy knows. Come on, man. He knows. He said the same thing with McCaffrey, like 15 of 17 weeks this season. Just say he's out. It's so crazy. But yeah, Mike Davis, I have no reason to believe that he's going to play. That leaves us with Rodney Smith, Matt. That leaves us with Trenton Cannon. I don't know. Rodney Smith a few weeks ago actually saw a decent amount of opportunities. He's had 7 carries in some of these games since he began getting worked in week 10. My assumption is that he's going to get the majority of work, but I don't know what the majority of work means, especially against this Saints team. I mean, I just don't think I want to get here.
I think I'd rather just bet on Curtis Samuel. If I feel like I want to get really creative in a large field tournament, sure, a running back who's probably going to get 7 to 9 touches in the Carolina offense against the Saints in a comeback situation could theoretically score multiple times. But that's really what we're betting on. I think Curtis Samuel with his hybrid role is definitely going to get backfield looks, but also he gets the added air yards of being a third wide receiver, maybe second if Robbie Anderson doesn't play. So I think that's the option I'm going for if you want a backfield option here. That's just not the type of running back I want to play, a 4K running back that maybe gets 10 touches if I'm lucky.
Yeah, and against the Saints, no less, in a game that could get away from them pretty quickly. Anything else here? Yeah,
that's about it. Not touching Ian Thomas.
All right. Yeah, no, please no. Don't talk to me about Ian Thomas. We can talk about the Indianapolis Colts, who are monster favorites at home against the Jaguars. 14-point favorites, 49.5-point total in this one. Their implied total, by the way, is exceptionally high, 31.75, second highest on the entire slate. Yeah, that leads you to Jonathan Taylor. It leads you to T.Y. Hilton. But we got to start with Taylor because while he is expensive, his workload has seen a significant increase recently. I think in a game like this, you could get an easy 20-plus carries for Jonathan Taylor. My only concern is they go up super early and Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins start getting opportunities, which would be concerning to me if they're just trying to rest Taylor for the postseason.
Yep, that's exactly how I saw it when I first looked at this game. The gut reaction, of course, is, man, Jonathan Taylor is in a smash spot. And for people who bet on him early in the season, in season-long leagues or dynasty leagues, you've got to be thrilled with not only the workload, now he's inside the top 6 running backs in expected fantasy points per game over the last 8 weeks, but we're seeing him break tackles at among the league's best rates over that same span. He's almost 4 points per game over expectation. That's top 10 in the league. And he's really turned his season around. He's had a really high quality rookie year after a rickety start that, he got plenty of opportunity with that Marlon Mack injury, but he disappointed until about week 10 when he really turned on the burners. Like you said, I think there are 2 situations where Nyheim Hines gets extra work, and that's if this game gets unexpectedly close late. Expect Rivers to have the ball in his hands more, and we could see more passing reception attempts for Hines. But also, if this game gets out of hand, exactly like you said, I think they're going to rest Taylor. That doesn't mean he couldn't score multiple times before he rests, but it does just lower the floor a little bit. It's one of those situations where I'm still going to have plenty of him. I think he's a value as the 7th highest running back on the slate, but it's not something where I absolutely need to be with the field because there's 17.5% projected ownership. That's really high.
It is very high. But it's an interesting game just because they could blow the doors off Jacksonville quite quickly and handily, which is what I see potentially being the case. I wouldn't even be surprised to see, we talk about the running back wide receiver with no quarterback pairing winning tournaments. If it happened, if Hilton and Jonathan Taylor happened to be in the same winning lineups, that would not shock me at all. What are your thoughts on T.Y. Hilton coming into this game after finally beginning to put the pieces together late in the season when it didn't matter for most people and many had already written him off? The only thing I will throw out there just to add to this quickly is while he has definitely been better, he's been a lot more efficient. And outside of that game against Houston, his volume hasn't really increased significantly. He's still seen 7 or fewer targets in, 4 of his last 5 games, but T.Y. Hilton has been better, and you got to give him that.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a great point. The Colts have not changed their passing game identity at all. They still spread it out among the leagues, or spread it out as a passing offense more than most teams in the league. I think they're still in the bottom 5 in terms of pass consolidation. That's something I look at the data deep dive. But still, you have Hilton ranked outside the top 25 in terms of salary at $5,500 on DraftKings, and a player who's really just top 20 now in expected fantasy points per game. So just from that standpoint, he looks like a value. Then when you factor in the fact that he's facing a matchup where the Jaguars are 30th in the league in fantasy points allowed over opponent averages, things really, really line up for Hilton in this spot. And I was actually surprised to see Phillip Rivers is only 6.5% owned. Now, that's very high for quarterbacks on this slate, but still a Phillip Rivers stack. I think he looks like a very interesting value as the 15th highest salary quarterback as well. Hilton and Rivers is going to be one of the stacks I target for sure.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Maybe Zach Pascal? Anybody else that stands out to you?
I still think I have some hope for Michael Pittman. I know he had a few larger games in the mid part of the season and has performed at or below expectation for most of the later part of the year. But that's really the only place I'm going to go. I still think there's some value there. He's outside the top 45 wide receivers in salary, but that's more for large field tournaments.
All right. On the opposite side, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're really in bad shape in the backfield, but it may present some opportunity. And I'll just tell you why. James Robinson is out, but Dare Ogunbowale saw 14 carries last week in a game that they lost by 27 points, or was it 24 points? I don't know. They lost by a lot of points, right? 3+ scores, never was competitive.
Mm-hmm.
He's also their primary pass catching back with James Robinson out. That to me says that even if they get smoked, Doug Marrone is just going to continue to run out Dare or whoever it is, but I assume it will be him. And last week, he played 71% of the snaps. I actually don't think it's the craziest idea to have some shares of him at $500 north of minimum salary, assuming he's going to be on the field most of the time and get all of the running back opportunities, not to mention also that they're going to be down probably a lot of wide receivers as well. DJ Shark, I don't think is going to end up playing in this game, and it looks kind of ugly there.
Yeah, hey, 71% snap share and 88% of the rushing attempts for Dare Ogunbowale. I originally wrote down that Divina Zigbo was going to mix in, but that doesn't really look like the case. And of course, don't forget about their third string running back, the pride of Kutztown College, Craig Reynolds. No, I'm joking.
Kutztown, PA?
Yeah, there you go.
How about that? I had a bunch of close friends that went there.
Hey, there you go. I didn't even know the connection there. But
neither did
like you said, I was surprised that maybe they're just are a one running back team. We know this coaching staff is most likely out the door at the end of the year. So they're just handing it off to their first string running back and not getting creative at all. If that's the case, like you said, at a near minimum salary, even in a terrible matchup, you don't mind it at all. He could stumble into the end zone. So yeah, a little bit of Dare Ogunbowale, especially if his ownership stays where it is projected right now, under 1.5% owned. I'm assuming that's going to go up a little bit more as the week goes on, but it's certainly not going to be a popular play. And touches are valuable. It's that simple at the running back position sometimes.
Alex still has James Robinson in at like 3%. So I think we just need to get our next updated ownership run, and then we're fine.
Gotcha.
Actually, hold on. They were updated an hour ago. Let me see. Just curious here. James Robinson is not in. So Dare is coming up around 6%, which makes more sense.
Okay. That does make a lot more sense.
It's still
but
not
even
that
then,
high, though.
Yeah.
Look, he's $4,500. If the guy has, maybe these are lofty expectations, but if he's targeted 7 times and has 6 receptions, that's a touchdown's worth of points right there. He had 19 total looks last game, and they got blown out. So I'm willing to always take a look at volume, even if you're not in a great spot.
We're not saying go crazy here, but we are saying if you make 20 lineups for a tournament, if you put him in 2, you're over the field. That's all we're saying.
Great point. Yeah, exactly. And he could not score and still have like 17, 18 fantasy points, which might get you there. We've seen it happen a lot with these cheaper backs. Tennessee and Houston. Have you seen the total on this game, Matt?
Is it going crazy? Wow. Is it over 56?
56.5 points right now. Yeah. 56.5. Tennessee, 7.5 point favorites, a 32 point implied total, the highest on the slate. But what makes this game so great is that the Texans still have a total up around 25. And we could start with Tennessee. I know that at Awesemo and a lot of the professional players out there are very much opposed to running out an expensive Derrick Henry on most weeks. Well, you know what? Call me crazy, but I love Derrick Henry this week. I truly could see a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game in the cards for him. It sucks that he doesn't catch passes. That would have really come in handy against Green Bay on Sunday Night Football. But man, against this Houston team, 32-point implied total, a Houston run defense that has essentially been as bad as the Dallas Cowboys. Think about that. Almost as bad as the Dallas Cowboys defense this season. There's just so much I like here. 152 yards per game on the ground Houston's allowing this season. You guys don't have to agree with me, but I'm getting the Derrick Henry even at his price point.
How can you not? I understand that the fish play element of it all, but when you look at my favorite defensive metric for fantasy scoring, fantasy points allowed over opponent average, Houston is allowing over a touchdown more in fantasy scoring per game to running backs than their averages. So if you combine that number with Derrick Henry's expected fantasy points, you get by far the number one running back on the slate. His wart on his profile is that he doesn't catch passes. But as we already joked about earlier in the show, the Titans don't even care about the score. They get the ball to Derrick Henry no matter what. An adjusted rush rate, that's an advanced stat on Awesemo.com. They're third in the league. Adjusted pace, they're fast. They're ranked fourth in the league. So that's plenty of plays and plenty of times to give it to Derrick Henry no matter what the score is. The Houston defense, in my opinion, is the worst rush defense in the league. I'm going to be one of those fish playing Derrick Henry this weekend. It's that simple.
Me too. And I don't feel too badly about it. Maybe I'll get some Dare Ogunbowale and Derrick Henry, even
exactly.
It out a little bit.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. 9,400. He might end the careers of this Houston defense. So I'm on board. I also look, the problem with their passing game, and I've really liked Tannehill this season just because on the weeks where everyone is on Henry and he's chalk, Tannehill has proven that he can have some big games. I mean, even last week against Green Bay, ugly game, but you saw what he can do with his legs too, right? 55 rushing yards and a score. He had 2 rushing touchdowns the week before that. What does he have? 4 or 5 on this? 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. Tannehill does have that upside, but his price is getting up there, and that's the only concern. A.J. Brown is $7,200. He's questionable, didn't practice yesterday. I don't know what's going on with him. And Corey Davis did not catch a single pass. I had such a stellar showdown lineup. It was looking like it was going places, Matt. Equanimous St. Brown, A.J. Dillon, Devontae Adams, captain. Everything looked great. But Corey Davis, 0 fantasy points on 2 targets. I expect a bit of a bounce back here. There's simply no way he's going catchless in back-to-back games, especially someone that already has 5 100-yard games on the season.
Yeah, he's had a great season, and I'm really mad at him too because I had a dynasty championship where I actually had a chance to beat a team that had Kamara and Mike Evans blow up, and I still had a chance.
You had Davis?
I had Davis, and it completely ruined it.
Brutal.
So, yeah, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. They have been resting A.J. Brown on Wednesdays, so that might be just a whole nothing there. But I agree here. You have to look at Ryan Tannehill's usage and the pace, not just the pace of play, but how often they're passing, and see if it compares at all to the salary-based expectations. Ryan Tannehill needs to be absurdly efficient as a passer or a rusher in order to pay off at the 8th highest quarterback salary on the main slate. If you look at expected fantasy points, which isn't as helpful for quarterbacks as it is for skill position players, he's still 21st among quarterbacks. Yes, he's been performing well above that, meaning he is an efficient player, but it's tough to bet on here. I'm not going to have none of him. He's 7th on the Awesemo top stack probability tool. So there's certainly talent in A.J. Brown and Corey Davis that could take advantage of a terrible Houston defense that is not just bad on the ground. But like you said, the quarterback 8 salary is just kind of the thing that really gets me in trouble here. I don't think he has the usage unless he scores multiple touchdowns for it to pay off.
Okay. Do you have anything else for Tennessee, or is it mostly Derrick Henry and probably some sprinkles of passing stacks?
Happy to play Jonnu Smith. Again, this is something I've said before on shows. One of my weak spots is not playing tight ends who don't have a huge amount of usage, but continue to score touchdowns over and over. If you look at touchdowns scored per game, not a sticky stat in terms of it's sticking from week to week, but Jonnu Smith keeps scoring. Never a problem playing a tight end that just keeps scoring touchdowns.
The Tennessee Titans defense hasn't exactly been stellar, though. You know, they win some games, and they win them usually on the back of Derrick Henry and really Ryan Tannehill and AJ Brown. But at 10-5, tied with the Colts for the lead in the division, they have still had some brutal games defensively. And you look at it, they've allowed on the year, they're allowing the fifth most passing yards per game. They got carved apart on the ground and through the air by Green Bay. Now, if you want to say, well, it was snowing, it was freezing cold, it was Green Bay, that happens to a lot of teams. You know, fine. I'm willing to at least entertain that, but they're allowing 5 yards per attempt. Or sorry, let me pull this up, Matt. I was on offense. It's like, that doesn't seem right. That's but their team is so. Where is it? I can't find it now, but I know that just all in all, their defense has struggled in a lot of different areas. And here it is. Passing touchdowns. They've allowed 33 passing touchdowns on the year. That is as many as the Jaguars and fewer than only the Detroit Lions. So only one team has allowed more passing touchdowns on the season than this Tennessee Titans squad, which has made them so good for game stacks.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was seeing too. And again, sound like a broken record, but fantasy points allowed over opponent average is through the roof against Tennessee defenses this year, especially for wide receivers. So that means that Kiki Kuti or Chad Hansen could once again be values with Kuti just inside the top 30 wide receivers in salary at 5,400. Hansen at 4,400 keeps performing above expectation. That's probably due to Watson's play. But like you said, against this defense, I think that Houston could absolutely keep pace, or at the very least create a game environment that's great for fantasy scoring. I also think that Deshaun Watson is the third highest QB in salary, is a great play. He's got rushing upside and expected fantasy points. It's right in line with salary-based expectation. And as expected, when a team can't stop wide receivers, quarterbacks are also having a field day against Tennessee. So I like that play.
Me too. I like a lot here. What about David Johnson's price point? He's coming in at $6,800 on DraftKings now. Yeah,
it's a little bit higher than I would like to see. He's not a priority play, but I don't hate it at all. You know, it was nice to see him perform above expectations, just like have an old school David Johnson game for once, but it's not something that not somewhere I need to go.
All right. Anything else?
That's really it. Moving on.
All right. So let's talk about the Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Normally you'd look at this game and say, oh, look, good rematch. This went to overtime earlier in the season. Herbert and the Chargers had a legitimate shot of winning this game. And of course, as they do in typical Chargers fashion, they lost by one possession. That's just what they do. They're spectacular at it. They've mastered that craft. But now you got Chad Henne starting for Kansas City, which leaves them at Arrowhead Stadium coming in as 3.5-point dogs to the Chargers and only a 44-point total. So I say all of that, Matt, just to point out that this game could have been a lot better if there were real implications on the line. But the Chiefs have a 20-point implied total. The Chargers have a 23.75 implied total. There's not a ton here, but we can start with the Chargers because if we're going to find anything good, it'll be from this side of the football.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, they actually showed up pretty strong. I think that was Justin Herbert's first start or second start, and he really played well early in the season against this Chiefs defense. But we're talking about a quarterback who's fifth in salary, 7,400 on DraftKings. And I think that is going to keep people away from Justin Herbert in terms of expected ownership. So there is some game theory elements that I like, but I like the ground game a little bit more. I still love Austin Eckler, even though they're still moving away from him at the goal line. In quality opportunities, that's targets and goal line carries. Austin Eckler has been one of the best players in the entire league, or best running backs, I should say, in that statistics. And he also shows up in expected fantasy points. He's 8th in the league. So I think I would like Eckler a little bit more if he had a little bit lower of a salary. But I worry that this game total just stays really low, and that lowers the ceiling of all of these players, including Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Austin Eckler. So it's not my favorite spot, especially with the salary so high, but I don't fault anyone for going with a typical Herbert Allen stack or even with Mike Williams, because I do think they're going to show up, and I do think they'll score points in this game.
Has Eckler's usage not seemed a little bit strange to you lately?
It is a little bit. I have more concern than the stats show on the surface there. Maybe he's not 100%. You know that they don't have much to play for, and I do think he's in their long-term plans. Maybe a little biased because he is one of my favorite players in the league, and he does pop in some of my favorite metrics, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been watching the games, and I know his snap count seems pretty consistent with what we've seen, but it just seems like he's not, 7 combined targets over the last 2 games, 23 carries. He's had 13 and 17 overall looks, which are okay, but I'm a little bit scared here. I just don't know if we're going to see that in week 17, that big game when they have so many guys that they can use out of the backfield. I get it though, Matt. I do. I understand why, if you're taking a shot on someone, Austin Eckler is just so talented and they're favored, and Kansas City's sitting a lot of players. I get it for sure. But I don't know. The Chargers concern me a little bit on the Kansas City side. No Tyreek Hill, no Travis. We don't have to list them all. All their good players are out. What are you doing with the Chiefs?
I'm probably staying away. I actually was surprised to see that the Awesemo projections kind of like Chad Henne compared to his salary-based expectations. We obviously don't have a ton of stats on him. We're really basically saying this is an Andy Reid play and that he's going to have this team basically prepared enough to keep pace with the Chargers here. And the Chargers have not been special against quarterbacks this year, ranking 26th in the league in fantasy points allowed over opponent averages. But obviously, this is not a priority play. Travis Kelce is incredibly tough to pay up for as the highest tight end in salary on the main slate. Obviously, the talent's still there, but if we don't know if Hill or Kelce is going to get a full snap share, Le'Veon Bell has done nothing but disappoint in the backfield. You're a stronger person than I if you go to this Kansas City offense in week 17 with nothing to play for.
What about Darrell Williams?
It's sort of like what we were saying with the Jaguars backfield. If we do hear rumblings as we head into Sunday that they're basically going to rest people, but one running back is Rappaport and Schefter sometimes have these tweets at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning where they're expected to just see 30 touches or the main backfield workload. I guess maybe it's not something that's super exciting, but the Chargers have been right in line with league averages in fantasy points allowed over opponent averages to running backs. So it doesn't stand out unless you think the Chiefs are going to score points here. Sure, a running back that gets plenty of touches could fall into the end zone.
If Rappaport tweets that at 10 a.m., I suggest you run in the opposite direction.
That's a good point.
Las Vegas and Denver. This game's got a pretty high total, and a lot of that is because this Vegas defense has been dreadful, Matt. I mean, they have been beat to hell. They're 2.5-point favorites, though, against the Broncos. 51-point total. It's just kind of an intriguing game. First of all, the Raiders' point totals that they've allowed recently are just magnificent. 26 to Miami, 30 to the Chargers, 44 to the Colts, 28 to the Jets, 43 to Atlanta, 35 to Kansas City. They have just given up huge point totals recently. And I think if there's ever an opportunity for, Drew Lock to come in saying his job's probably not here next year and just chuck it, which he's been doing, 47 pass attempts last game. Maybe there's something there. The big question is, who does he throw the ball to? Is it outside of Noah Fant? It's been pretty difficult to figure out who it's going to be. KJ Hamler might not play this week, but more than anything, do you think there's some viability to getting to Drew Lock in a game with a 50-plus point total?
No, there's not a huge priority there. In large field tournaments, I'm completely fine playing a stack with Drew Lock and Noah Fant, or even Tim Patrick or Jerry Jeudy if you're really trying to get crazy here. Lock's projection is right in line with salary-based expectations, but we have players in his salary range at $5K who we believe can perform well above salary-based expectations. I saw a stat that said Jerry Jeudy has the most unrealized air yards in the league this year. That's air yards that are thrown to him minus the air yards from completions. So basically, he's getting open plenty. Drew Lock just can't get him the ball. And that's really what I think is the problem with this Denver offense. Not only is Cortland Sutton out for the year, and they've had problems since that point, but Drew Lock just isn't an accurate quarterback at this point. He's actually 11th in expected fantasy points per game And not surprisingly, he ranks outside the top 25 in fantasy points scored below expectation. So that's a player who I see as just plainly inefficient. You're basically playing the value game if you want to play him in your lineup this week. 5K for a quarterback is fine if you want to pay up for players like Derrick Henry.
How about Melvin Gordon with Phillip Lindsay on the IR?
Yes, that is a player I'll absolutely go to. In the data deep dive this week, I actually talked about Melvin Gordon. From an elusiveness standpoint, he absolutely is the same player that we saw in San Diego and Los Angeles in the early parts of his career. And what's funny is that he actually had a year, his rookie season, where he was elusive but did not score touchdowns. And because of the nature of the Denver offense just being basically inept, that's sort of what we're seeing this year as well. He's outside the top 25 running backs in expected fantasy points per game. But again, from an efficiency standpoint, he stands out. He ranks 13th in the NFL in fantasy points scored over expectation. So he's not my favorite, especially when I see that he's going to be 14% owned, but I completely get it based on salary. He's sort of in that Myles Gaskin range in the mid 5,500 range. So I like Melvin Gordon most out of this Denver offense.
Okay. Yeah, me too. I think it's a strong spot. Last week I was underweight on Melvin Gordon. This week I anticipate having quite a bit of him against this Raiders defense. They get banged up no matter whether it's on the ground, through the air. I expect someone from Denver to score. And Melvin Gordon's the one that should have been getting all the carries recently, even before Lindsay went down, far more efficient than Lindsay, who was averaging like 2.3 yards per attempt since week 9. You just can't have that. And not fortunately, but it's a good thing that Melvin Gordon, not fortunate that Phillip Lindsay got hurt, but it's a good thing that Melvin Gordon's got the backfield to himself to close out the year. What are you doing with the Raiders on the other side, Matt?
Well, I'm certainly prioritizing Darren Waller, third in the league in air yards over the last 2 weeks. He's not slowing down at all to end the season. And, I'm sure it's been said many times, but he's just completely transformed into one of the most exciting players at that position. Derek Carr has no problem going to him seemingly every single passing play. And I actually like Derek Carr this week at 5,100 in salary, 21st among active quarterbacks. And, he does have an expected ownership around 6%, might be a little bit higher since I don't have that latest rerun in my notes here. But if I'm going anywhere to begin, it's Carr Waller stacks because Josh Jacobs, I should say, hasn't exactly had that same workload that we expected at the beginning of the year, or we saw at the beginning of the year. And he's still really priced up for matchup. He's 9th among running backs in salary. The Awesemo projections are not bullish on him this week like they are for Waller and Carr.
Anything else?
Hey, Nelson Aguilar, am I allowed to say his name around you? Because
God.
he keeps
sure,
overperforming.
Go ahead, because since week 10, he has the second most drops in the league. How about that? That's the one silver lining to keep me sane after seeing him pop off last week for another huge game.
Yeah, and it was a little poetic too, where he had that huge touchdown, but then of course the Raiders defense completely blows it on that insane throw by Fitzpatrick.
I love that guy. I love him.
That's one of the coolest completions of the whole year.
Did you see the still shot of him with his face being grabbed all the way back?
I don't know if he throws that ball if the defender isn't ripping his face mask, because he knows if he throws it like that, he gets the call.
Yep.
Stabbing move to begin with, but he completed it. It's unbelievable.
It was spectacular. Everyone should appreciate what Ryan Fitzpatrick has done for the game of football. All right, 2 to go, Matt. And I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of time or need a whole lot of time to spend on this next one. Appreciate all you guys hanging with us throughout this long marathon of a show. It's 15 games. It's the final matchup show of the season. You're going to see us for the playoffs, 6 games next week. I can't wait for that. We're going to be doing a ton. Strategy shows, deeper dives, live before locks, all of that stuff. So we're not going anywhere. This show will just be going into hibernation until September of 2021. Arizona, and by the way, hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Again, for those of you guys that jumped in late, we're trying to get to 50K by the Super Bowl. I think it's very, very possible. And well, if that's the case, we're doing some big stuff, big giveaways, awesome stuff. But more than anything else, subscribe because you like the show. If you do like it, if you like the host, the analyst, and you think we've helped you, hit that subscribe, join the family here at Awesemo. All right, Arizona and the LA Rams. Cardinals 3-point favorites, 40.5 point total. It looks like Murray's going to play. Got a full practice in yesterday. But on the other side, we know that Jared Goff is out. that means that we're getting John Wolford. And this is ugly. Cam Akers might actually play. If he does, I love him. I don't care if his ankle hurts. I love Cam Akers with Darrell Henderson out, but I don't think he's going to play. I could cover this game just in a few seconds, Matt. Cooper Kupp's not expected to be activated from the COVID-19 list, so I want nothing to do with the passing game there. And, DeAndre Hopkins has the hip injury. So for me, it's Akers if he plays. I will be taking shots at 6,100. Darrell Henderson's on the IR. Akers was the clear go-to bell cow back for 2 weeks before the injury, 3 weeks as a matter of fact. And then Kyler Murray needs a win. Let's start there. Does Kyler Murray, if he plays, is he going to be able to poke some holes in this quality Rams defense?
Yeah, I don't love it on first glance here, knowing that he's injured, knowing that he gets so many of his fantasy upside comes from using his legs. I'm concerned about Kyler Murray just as a plain pocket passer, not necessarily about getting a win, because I don't think I have any faith whatsoever in the Rams offense keeping pace. But I don't think this lines up as a fantastic matchup against a Rams defense that ranks number 1 in fantasy points allowed under opponent expectation or opponent averages over the last 5 weeks. So there's a lot of things not playing in Kyler Murray's favor, although it is a win and in situation. And they do have the war of attrition battles right now are definitely going on the Arizona Cardinals side. You know, sometimes this happens in football where there's a team like the Rams who probably should be a playoff team, but because of injuries, because of timing of injuries, they just may not have enough in the tank to get over the hump here. Hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're laughing about that next week. But right now, I still see Kyler Murray as a decent floor play more than a ceiling play. So bottom line is, I think there are players in his price range this week that I like a lot more, unless that ownership stays really, really low, like it was at the beginning of the week. I'm sure it's a little higher now with that rerun of ownership projections, but at the beginning of the week, he was coming in at 0.5% ownership. And this is a player who's still 5th in fantasy points per game. So at that place, I'm going to absolutely have some of him. But like you said, they're dealing with injuries. Hopkins is absolutely not 100%. Neither is Chase Edmonds or Kenyon Drake. There's just not a ton to like against a quality Rams defense here, even if we think they're going to win. This might be a stay away offense for DFS purposes.
Hopkins is going to play, though. Like, he has to play. You know, I feel like you might get some heroics from DeAndre Hopkins where he just toughs it out and has a monster game and gets them into the postseason. It's pure narrative, pure speculation, but at 7,900, I might have a little bit more interest in him than you do, just because he is still one of the preeminent wide receivers in the league, and they absolutely need a win here. But you're right. Murray's banged up. Hopkins is banged up. It could just be a stay away spot. And maybe I don't need to go crazy looking at a Hopkins at low ownership when there are so many other quality options in similar spots. For the Rams, like I said, Matt, my only thing here, and I know a lot of people would say, why would you want anything to do with the Rams? Well, with Wolford at quarterback, with Kupp out, and Kyler Murray injured, and the Rams having a good defense to hopefully, keep this offense for Arizona at bay. If Akers plays and they say he's not going to be limited, I know it's a long shot, but he is not ruled out yet. And McVay said he's making great progress. If that's the case, I will have a lot of him, and I will take that risk. Sometimes you got to do that. What are your thoughts on the Rams offense this week?
I think that's a great call. And, John Wolford, and without Cooper Kupp, has a lot stacked against him here. So in large field tournaments, if you want to play this game as going awry for the Cardinals, I don't think that's the worst idea. I certainly don't think that's the highest probability of how this game plays out. Wolford also has some agility in the pocket. He's in the 61st percentile among quarterbacks in SPARQ score. So we might see him rush a little bit. But like you said, there's nobody left at the running back position except for Cam Akers here if he's able to play. So I will definitely have him at 6,300. I don't know if I'm going to be as prioritized on him as it sounds you are. We're still dealing with a team in the Cardinals who are actually allowing below opponent averages in fantasy points scored on the defensive side of the ball. But we have a team in the Rams that are high pace. And they're 6th in the league in adjusted pace on the Awesemo Advanced Stats page. And we have a consolidation of offense. We know if Akers plays, it's really Akers, Woods, and nobody else. So in that case, I'm fine there. And it is a must-win game for them as well, depleted as they are.
Yep. Orton's neck beard. Thank you for the super chat. He says, bummed if I can't go all in on Strevler. He's from near me, and if you have a chance to check out his wiki pick, you should. You could see he's a must start. Matt, what did I tell you to look up?
Is that your burner? Did you just reply with your burner into the chat? Because that's literally what Dave said.
I told Matt right before the show started, I was like, you got to look up his Wikipedia picture because it's fantastic. And we both agreed that makes him a must start, not a stay away. Some people, Ben Rasa saw it and said, oh, God, I want nothing to do with that. We see that and say, that's a man's man, Matt.
We're going all in. I'm about to lose all my money on him.
All in on a guy who's not starting. Thanks, though, buddy. Appreciate that. And yes, it's a gnarly picture. All right, man. 14 down, 1 to go. You ready to make this happen?
Hey, we made great time. Absolutely. Let's do it.
We're doing pretty well. Absolutely. Seattle, and we started 6 or 7 minutes late.
Oh, shoot.
So we're actually doing good time. Seattle at San Francisco. I'm going to ask you straight up, Matt, after I give these odds. Seahawks favored by a touchdown, 6-point favorites, 46-point total. What the hell is up with the Seahawks offense?
They're bad. They're not a good offense. They got bad fast. I don't know what else to say. Russell Wilson, I don't think he's injured, but he's inefficient. Like, what else can we say here?
Do you know they had, I'm sorry, I have to say this because it's insane. They scored 30-plus points, right? In 7 of their first 8 games. They've scored 16, 28, 23, 12, 40, that's the Jets, 20 and 20 since then.
That's enough of a sample size where I don't even care who they played. You don't have to tell me. That's a long enough part of the season where we're saying this is an inefficient offense. And so, yes, Russell Wilson had this amazing beginning of the season, but he's now way outside the top 10 in all of the advanced metrics that I look at in the data deep dive. He's still 8th in expected fantasy points per game, but he's outside the top 20 in fantasy points scored above or below expectation over the last 8 weeks. And he's in a bad matchup here. So I don't really see a situation where I want to prioritize Russell Wilson. It's weird to see the Seahawks, that is, so low on the top stack probability tool, because in the beginning of the year, we were just playing Wilson and Metcalf, Wilson and Lockett, just figuring out ways to put them in our lineup. And yeah, I guess the ceiling is still there because we've seen it in 2020, but boy, the odds of that happening are just way lower. I want to say the odds of Russell Wilson being a top 6 quarterback, probably 15, 20%, 1 in 5.
It's crazy. Oh, by the way, we had a question in chatter. Someone said, I'm surprised Malcolm Brown wasn't mentioned. I think Cam Akers is a markedly better running back than Malcolm Brown. And I already think the matchup is difficult enough. I know Darrell Henderson is out. If Cam Akers is out, sure. Malcolm Brown is a speculative value play. I get it. I don't have an issue with it. But I would prefer a better running back in Cam Akers that is far more explosive. Malcolm Brown essentially breaks off nothing north of 10 yards. You'll never see a big run from him. Cam Akers owns like all of the longest runs for the Rams this season. And if you've watched, you've seen he's the only explosive back. Darrell Henderson had 1 or 2. But I just don't think Malcolm Brown is that good, Matt. So, yeah, if he is the only healthy back that's left in this spot, then sure, I have no issues with it. But that's why I'd prefer Cam Akers even at a more expensive price point, assuming he plays.
Yeah, you're really hoping for goal line carries. We've seen multiple games over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons where Malcolm Brown doesn't do much but falls into the end zone. And yeah, sure, that could happen. Large field tournaments, no problem with it. But Cam Akers is the talent there.
All right. Anything else for Seattle?
I think Greg Olson's going to play. I think we're going to see Greg Olson, and there's always some viability as playing a Seattle Seahawks dart throw tight end. But there's 3 of them at this point. That makes it really tough. And Hollister, Olsen, and Disley, that is completely speculative. None of them really stand out from an expected fantasy point standpoint. We just know that if Russell Wilson does manage to pull it together and throws multiple scores here, like he theoretically could, never rule out the tight end position. When Russ is cooking, we often say he does not care who he's throwing to. That's less true this year. But I don't mind playing a tight end in a dart throw situation.
Let's close it out with San Francisco. C.J. Beathard getting the start. Again, I'll tell you what, I don't think it's really a significant downgrade from Nick Mullins at this point, so I'm not factoring in too much there. George Kittle, though, $6,000. While he may not have run a ton of routes last week, he was targeted on a ton of routes that he ran. So, put that in context. He also ripped off 92 yards on 4 receptions. He's insane. His longest catch was only 27 yards, too. So put those pieces together. It's like every time he catches the ball, he's going for 20 plus. I just think at 6,000, he's too cheap against Seattle. Seattle's defense has looked better lately, but when you look at the teams they faced, the reason they're getting wins and the reason they're limiting points and getting W's with low scoring totals on offense is because they're just not playing against good offenses. And I think this is not exactly a good offense, but George Kittle is a juggernaut at the tight end position, second best in the league. This is someone I like here. And I'll just put in one more guy, and I'll let you close this show out, Matt. With Brandon Ayuk out, with Deebo Samuel out, I don't think Richie James is the craziest option if you're trying to get some really expensive players. Maybe you wanted a Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams lineup, or Derrick Henry and Calvin Ridley or whoever, just some expensive players. Richie James has proven that a couple times this season he does have that big game potential against Green Bay, where everyone was out, and now Kittle's back, sure, but he had 9 for 13, 184 and a touchdown. That was in that blowout loss on Monday Night Football. He had 4 for 56 just a couple weeks ago against Dallas. He's basically minimum salary. I assume he's going to get worked in quite a bit more, especially if Kittle's still limited. Who's are going to be their top guy? And then you have Jeff Wilson, who is actually a good running back. I've been trying to tell you guys that for a while.
Hey, and anytime we have a situation where, whether it's due to injury or coaching decisions, an offense gets consolidated and it has sort of 2 players taken out of their primary group, limiting the amount of players left in that group, it gets a lot easier to guess where this offensive production is going to come from. So I completely see what you're seeing here, where we know where CJ Beathard's going to throw the ball. It's George Kittle and probably no one else, maybe the backfield in Jeff Wilson. So I see no reason to really deviate from that point. But if you are going to, Richie James is a great option. He had a 13 target game earlier in the season. Yes, I know that was due to basically the entire wide receiver and tight end core not being available, but it just shows you that target upside that's available to him. My favorite player amongst them, that group, is actually Jeff Wilson. I think he's a really, really solid play at the 32nd highest salary among running backs this week. He's scoring at a top 20 rate right now in fantasy points per game. And the Seattle defense is nothing special against the run. They've been a team that we've been picking on against the run all year. The problem here is that the 49ers are a slow, methodical team. They're 30th in adjusted pace of play. So they're not going to run a ton of plays. But like I said, we have the gift here where we kind of know where that ball's going. I also think George Kittle's probably the top tight end play on the slate. So if you like Kittle over Wilson, no fault there. I think he's an awesome play as well.
So do you see yourself having who do you think you're going to have for San Francisco this week?
I don't see how I couldn't be at least with the field. I see Kittle's 10.5% projected ownership, at least in my notes here. It may have changed a little bit here. I'll probably be with the field, if not a little bit over, but I really, really like Wilson here. I like you said, I've seen an efficient running back who now has a majority of the backfield to himself in a Kyle Shanahan offense. I know it's a little bit narrative based, but this is one of the best running back efficiency gurus, if you will, in the league. And we know where the ball's going. So I'll take my chances there against the bad Seattle defense.
Beautiful. And watch out, fellas. Richie James game coming. 91% of snaps last week. 91%.
Wow.
And that was with Brandon Ayuk playing 93%, Kendrick Bourne playing 34%. It's not that crazy, but this is actually a pretty interesting side of this game, and I'm pretty intrigued by San Francisco this week. Guys, thanks so much for being with us for Week 17. It's a long show, and you guys have hung out all the time, and I appreciate everybody in chat. Everyone that comes in, hits that thumbs up and subscribes, and all of the super chats that you've given throughout this show, throughout the season. I know it's a very long show, but hopefully we've given you the information you needed to have a great year, and hopefully you have a great new year. 2021 coming up very shortly. But first, You got the NBA Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock. We're going to usher you into the new year in a big way. 5-game slate tonight. Hopefully you'll join us. It starts at 4:30 Eastern time. And the FanDuel Strategy Show with Matt Kajeski and Kyle Dvorchak also coming up at 2 Eastern. One-stop shop right here at Awesemo.com. And remember, use that promo code 2021 for 21 days, only $20, everything on the site. Or use the promo code HAPPY. You'll get 20% off everything for the entire year. It's a massive deal. Suggest you check them out, and we'll see you back here soon. Good luck tonight, or good luck on Sunday, guys.
Happy New Year, y'all.